Well, hello, writers. Welcome to episode number 523 of Ink in Your Veins. I'm Rachael Herron, and I'm so thrilled that you are here with me today as I am talking to Evelyn Skye on how to define true success. This is a delicious, lovely conversation. We also talk about deep work. We talk about spending it all, and I don't mean money. Talk about wanting to be a vampire. It is fantastic. So please stick around for the interview. What has been going on around here? I have been celebrating. I have been celebrating the USA Today bestseller status of The Seven Miracles of Beatrix Holland. If you're watching on the YouTube, I have a pretty little ring that I got. There's this ring company called Conquer Ring, about rings. And my friend A.K. Mulford told me about these. And these rings are incredible. I'm slipping it off of my finger, and then they're all spinners. They're all spinners. They're all little spinners. But they also click in and out, and they're actually very beautiful. You can get different stones for them, and the little stones, gems that click in and out, they're all interchangeable. Are really reasonable. They're quite inexpensive. And this one is kind of dark and spooky looking, hexagonal shape, black background, but inside there's real Queen Anne's lace, pink Queen Anne's lace, little pink flowers, just the color of Seven Miracles of Beatrix Holland. So I got this for myself as a celebration. But then also last weekend, I went to the hardware store and I saw in the hardware store my dream chair. And when I say my dream chair, I mean my dream chair. 2 years ago, I was on retreat at this little place on the water on the South Island, and I was doing a writing retreat, and there was this chair. It's a kind of a rattan chair with a very comfortable, cozy cushioned seat thing, and it's got a footrest. That's all it is. It's incredibly lightweight, but very sturdy, and it is so comfortable. And I know this because I spent, I don't know, 10 hours a day in that chair looking at the water while I wrote and read. It's like a recliner, but it's rattan. So it's basically an indoor-outdoor chair. And I've wanted it for so long, and it is expensive. Everything in New Zealand is expensive. But it is expensive. So I've had it on my watch list for when it goes on to Trade Me, which is kind of like the eBay or the Craigslist of New Zealand. And or Facebook, it's kind of like a Facebook marketplace, but it never comes up. Nobody's ever selling this thing because it's too comfortable. It's sold, I saw it being sold once for a little bit cheaper up in Auckland, which was impossible. And then I saw it just about half off at, I'll just tell you, it's normally $5.99, and it was at $3.99 at the Mitre 10, my hardware store, because it was the stock model. The stock model, that means that people haven't sat in that for 10 hours at a time. Maybe it's held 10,000 butts, but for not very long because they were there to pick up concrete or something else. They weren't there to just sit in a chair and relax. So that chair was basically brand new. It's $3.99. I couldn't make myself buy it. I left. Couldn't stop thinking about it. Went back a couple days later, and it had dropped to $3.49. And then I asked the nice young man who was standing nearby, I said, how do I go about buying a stock model? Because I had convinced myself to do this. And he goes, oh, I just picked up the foot cushion. There's a little bit of gum on the back. We didn't notice there was gum. And I said, oh, great. Can I have another discount? So he gave us $20 more off. So I got that thing for $3.29 New Zealand dollars, which is about 500 American. No, wait, that's the wrong way. 329 is probably about 200 American dollars. And I brought it home. It barely fit in the car. And we have a large station wagon. And it is on my little back porch, which is covered. There's a little back porch between my office, where I'm sitting right here, and the laundry room. And then that faces out to the backyard and the sky. And what I have lacked in Wellington is a covered place that I can watch the sky. I can oftentimes in the morning, I go up the hill, walk up the hill very carefully, and I have my Adirondack up there that I built last year. And I watch the clouds in the morning with the dog. But cloud watching is one of my favorite activities in the whole world. And in Wellington, it's frequently raining or really windy, and it's just not comfortable to sit in an exposed location. It's the windiest city in the world. I don't know if you've ever heard me say that before, probably 3,000 times. And it's covered, and I get to sit out there and it's, the middle of winter. Well, actually, we just turned to spring here. And I've been sitting out there and reading and watching the clouds drift and looking at the trees and watching the birds. And it is my USA Today best-selling chair. And I'm so comfortable in it. And I am so glad that I bought it. I have a hard time spending money on myself. It's difficult. So it was a very nice thing to buy, and I'm really loving it. And I'm not downplaying this celebration. I went out for brunch with some friends, and it's just been really nice. It doesn't change anything in terms of my life, my daily life, but I do get to call myself a USA Today bestselling author for the rest of my life, and I absolutely love that. I feel like it's like getting the OBE, it's getting knighted. It's yours forever, but I don't want to be knighted by a monarchy. I'd prefer to have this. This is my version of being knighted. Isn't that lovely? So that's what I've been doing. I have been celebrating, and I've also been writing, and I've been teaching, and it's felt very busy. So busy last week that I worked a lot of extra hours on Thursday and Friday. So guess what? I took Monday off. It was America's Labor Day weekend, and I don't normally celebrate the US holidays, but I chose to because I'd worked enough hours on my contract that I have talked about writing on this show. I'd worked enough hours to earn a full day off. So I took a day off and I didn't even take it out of my PTO or my sick leave. I just took a day off and I rode my bike and did Pilates and rented a van and brought home an inexpensive outdoor table, which we've been looking for forever. And now we've got to find a place to actually put it. And I need to clean up the backyard, and do the weed whacking and stuff like that because spring is on its way. It is already here. I just picked the first daffodil this morning. And yeah, I'm happy. Right now I'm warm. I've already done Pilates this morning. Did I tell you I've turned into a Pilates girly? Y'all, Pilates. It doesn't feel like you're doing anything. I'm, I mean, it feels like you're doing a little something, but it's never that hard for me. And I've been to 3 classes with 2 teachers now. And then the next day you hurt, but nicely, not like after you've done a big workout where you can barely move. Your whole body hurts. You didn't even know you used muscles, and then you feel them the next day. I'm really loving it. Plus, you lie down for a lot of it, and I just feel supported and safe. I'm always at risk of pulling these side muscles that I've had problems with in the past, and it just feels very supported and beautiful. Boy, I'm chatty today, so I'm going to stop chatting. Oh, I almost forgot to record this for Lillian, who emailed me with a question that I wanted to answer on the podcast. So I'm going to stick this in right here, and I'm glad that I remembered it because I forgot it last week. All right, Lillian says, I have a question about publishing. I don't think I'm ready to pursue publication yet, but I'm not sure what signs to look for to tell me when I am ready. I've heard people say that you should write 5 books first, or that you should write 1 million words first, etc. But I feel like it's a quality thing instead of a quantity thing. What should I look for in myself and in my books to tell me that I'm ready to start pitching them? I'm so glad you asked. And oh my goodness, there's so many quote unquote rules in publishing, aren't there? You will hear one person advise one thing and another person advise another. And I'm always trying to stay away from those kinds of rules, although I have my own rules, of course, that people will be familiar with on this show. Like you've got a right to write, and you've got to ignore that inner voice, that inner critic, and do the work anyway. And but these kind of rules, I think they can be harmful. So I want to say flat out, straight to you, don't worry about rules like that. 5 books or 1 million words first, or 3 books under the bed that you don't bring out. There's always somebody talking about their own particular experience. It is a quality thing instead of a quantity thing. Another one of my beliefs, which isn't a rule, but it is a belief that we have to write a quantity of words to make a crappy or scrappy first draft. And after that, we revise it into a good book. So that is one of my this one to me is a rule. All writers must not revise as they go. All writers must not revise as they go while writing a first draft, unless that is their process That's how they have to do it. And they are completing and publishing good books. If you revise as you go and you are completing and publishing good books, either traditionally or indie published, then that is your process. But it is the vast minority of people who actually are able to do that. High 99 percentages, the rest of us need to write a scrappy first draft and then revise it into something after the first draft is written. So the first round on a first draft is the quantity thing. We're just trying to get a quantity of words on the page. And that looks different for different people. Some people, it is just all garbage. I'm more of a garbage drafter. There's just nothing that makes sense. I don't finish sentences. I don't finish paragraphs. I don't finish scenes. I jump around. Because I need to stay interested in what I'm writing. And what that leaves is a big mess to clean up in revision. However, I love revision, and that's where the real creativity to me starts, is in revision. So I can't wait to get there. So I don't mind that big mess. I mean, I don't love it, but I don't mind it. For other people, they are more planners and they will plan out their work so that they have to do less revision, but everyone has to do that scrappy first draft and then a big, heavy second draft, the revision. I call it the make sense draft. That is the hardest work you'll probably ever do on your book, is that second draft where we're not looking for good sentences, we're not looking for beautiful words. We're looking to see if the plot hangs together, whether it's a novel or a memoir, and whether the character arcs are compelling and complete. So we're pulling the book apart in big, big chunks in order to put them back together into still scrappy chunks. At the end of a second draft, the second big draft, your book is still a mess. You couldn't let it leave your desk. But after that is when we start getting into the easier, quicker revisions. That third revision, often there is some working on the sentences and making lovely words. And then we could do passes of looking for specific things that in our writing need a little bit more work. All of this to say, you're moving from quantity to quality through the revision process. And when your book gets to as good as you can make it, it's the highest quality that you can make without outside help. Because for the most part, unless you are employing experts that you trust in the field, it can be not the greatest idea to be sharing your work with people who are not experts, because they'll give you opinions and they might hurt your feelings and they may very well be wrong. They're often wrong. So I like to say, keep it as close to your chest as you can for as long as you can. And then you start pitching. Then you can start sending out. You can either go searching for a developmental editor if you're going to indie publish, aka self-publish, or if you are going to attempt the traditional route, as soon as your book is as good as you can possibly make it, and usually that's after at least three drafts, so one first draft, two revisions. Um, Personally, for me, it's more like 5 or 6 drafts before I can let it go to my agent. That's what I am comfortable with. So it's as good as I can make it. I just can't think of one more thing to make it good. Then it's time to push it off your desk and start working on the next thing. That could be your first book that you've ever attempted writing, or it can be your 17th book that you've ever attempted writing, and you've never done anything with the previous 16 because you didn't know if you were good enough. We will never know if we're good enough. We will never feel like we are good enough. That's just part of how brains work. I really, really like the Hank Green 80% video. Google Hank Green 80%. We want to be getting our work to 80% as perfect as we can, because if we go toward the best we can do, like this is 100% the best I can do, we're kind of wasting time in those in that later 20%, because we could spin our wheels for months and months or years even trying to make our book just a little bit better, just a little bit better, so that we can send it out. Just send it out at 80% as good as you can possibly make it. It's up to the quality that you think is good. You send it out, you start working on the next book. And while agents are thinking about it or talking about it, or while you're getting rejections and sending more query letters out, you're working on the new book. And guess what? When you get that book up to 80% as good as you can make it, that's actually better than your last book because you have gotten smarter, you're a better writer, so your 80% mark is always going up and up and up instead of spending years spinning in those beautiful little tiny tweaks to try to make your book perfect. I've kind of gone all over the place right here. But my main point is pitch it whenever you want. Pitch your books whenever you want. As soon as you think they're as good as you can make them, you can start pitching them. Period. Don't let anybody tell you that you can't. And I'm so glad that you asked. Okay, let's jump into the interview. Evelyn Skye is the New York Times bestselling author of several novels, including The Hundred Loves of Juliet and The Incredible Kindness of Paper. A graduate of Stanford University and Harvard Law School, her books have been published worldwide and translated into 16 languages. Find out more at evelynskye.com. And here we go. Well, I am so pleased to welcome you to the show. Will you please share your name and pronouns with us?
I'm Evelyn Skye, and my pronouns are she, her.
Thank
Thank you for
you.
having me.
Thank you for coming. I just want to congratulate you on The Incredible Kindness of Paper that came
Thank you.
out last week. And I read it, I don't know, like 2 or 3 months ago, whenever I got it in the pre-pub form. And it is just beautiful and
Oh,
delightful. And I'm on a kick right now where I say I cannot be harrowed. If it is harrowing, I'm just out. I'm not
I
in the
love
mood
that.
right now. I can't be. And so of course yours had, big stuff happening, etc. There's still stuff happening, but it was so kind and delicious and sweet. And I would love to know before we jump into your process, were you aiming for that? Is that
I
is,
was. I was. Let me pull this
oh,
on the screen for anyone who happens to be watching. So this is why my background looks like what it is. So this is The Incredible Kindness of Paper. I really wanted to write a book that was hope in word form, but that
mm,
was like an intelligent, informed optimism and not just a naive kind of toxic positivity. And
mhm.
so it was I think it was pretty tricky to do that. And I was really actually scared about putting this book out there because I know there's a lot of skeptics out there and there's a lot of people who want to believe that, there's simply good and bad. People are good or they're bad. And I just feel that on an individual level, everyone is good, and I
I
wanted
do
to make sure,
too.
like, bring us back to that and remember that.
Yes, I believe that too, and I believe even the people that I disagree with so wildly, I do believe at a base level they are, at a gut level that they are also trying to do the best they can. They're
Yeah.
giving it their
They've
all.
got, they've got their motivations, just like
Yeah,
any of the characters that we write.
yeah.
And maybe we don't agree with their motivations or the way that they, present and act in the world. But, they're not out there for the most part being like mustache twirling villains, like, ha ha, I'm going to ruin Rachel's day today.
There may be a couple of billionaire exceptions that I will just, I'm not going to have them to my hot tub party, but everybody else, we're just trying. Oh, that's gorgeous. What a good reason behind or method or theme behind writing this. Can you share a little bit with us about your writing process and what it looks like?
Yeah, I would love to. So, I am a pretty regimented writer nowadays. So, I'm a decade into this career, and The
Mhm.
Incredible Kindness of Paper is my 10th novel in 10 years. So, I'm
Congratulations.
publishing one book a year.
Hmm.
And what that means is I kind of have a schedule. And
Hmm.
so, like right now, I'm just wrapping up the last bit of book publicity, but it's been publicity mostly for the summer, ramping up to the book coming out, then the book coming out last week, and now just doing, lovely conversations like this with you. And then after that, I will take a break for a couple months before I try to write another book because I don't have anything else to write. Like I've put
Hmm.
everything into whatever stories I've currently been working on. And then, around the holidays is when the ideas start churning again. And then I kind of start writing. And then I will do a really ugly zero draft. And that to me is so important to give yourself that permission to make it messy and just don't judge yourself. And I have friends who are very different kinds of writers. And so like I never try to prescribe a certain way of writing to people because one of my friends, she would be so unhappy writing fast and messy like I do. She really wants to make sure that every line is beautiful as she puts it down. So it takes her longer to write, but then her first draft, like, oh my goodness, the prose is already gorgeous, right? So like it
Hmm.
just takes us different paths to get to the same place. And then usually like around mid-January or early February, I've got like something decent enough to show my editor, and then I'll give it to her and say, "Hey, what do you think?" And then we'll start with that back and forth, revising it and making it better, and eventually, finishing it, the story and the characters enough that we can send it to copy edits. And around that time is when whatever book I wrote the previous year, is about ready to start going into
Yeah.
publicity mode. So, yeah.
I I love the knowledge, the self-knowledge that you have around your method and how it works. And I want to ask you about that fallow time because I know for a lot of us, and myself included, the fallow time is always what makes me nervous. Like, oh, I should be thinking harder. What should I be doing? But it sounds like you are pretty comfortable in that fallow time. Is there anything that you particularly do or don't do during that rest time?
Yeah, I think that is such a great question. I can't remember who I had on my podcast recently, but she was talking about that nervousness, the anxiety that you're never going to have any more ideas. And I think that's why
Oh
for
yeah.
a lot of writers, that fallow time, it's so nerve-wracking because you feel like I should be doing something. I should be like actively brainstorming. But what I have found is that when you're trying too hard, when you're at a period of time when your brain is tapped out, whether it's you just finished writing something or you just came off of really intense publicity, there's not the capacity to be creative quite yet. And so I like to go and live life. I go and just do fun things. I buy
Yeah.
tickets to comedy shows, or I go see a play, or I just go on long walks and I listen to music. And
Hmm.
you give yourself that permission to slow down, and then it's surprising when the ideas leak in. You don't expect them. You're listening to a psychology podcast or something, and all of a sudden some idea comes in. It's a completely unrelated thing, but then you have that spark and you think, oh, maybe.
I find that one of the most delicious times of writing is when the idea sparks and you think, no, no, I couldn't. And then you do.
Right.
You
I
know?
love that.
What is the most exciting thing that you've ever realized about your writing process?
I think it is that maybe I'm a little bit insane in the way that I write because, a lot of people, a lot of my friends, they look at me and they think, you are so regimented. Like, isn't it exhausting? Why are you so strict with yourself? And for me, I don't feel like I'm being strict with myself. It's just this intense joy of
Mm,
creation. And
hmm.
after I've gone through this rest period, I'm just so revived and excited to start again. I mean, you know how it feels about writing. Like writing is like magic sometimes. You're just the words are flowing. Sometimes they're terrible, but that's okay. You write them down and you throw them away the next day, or 2 months from now, and you just do it again. It is just such a joy, I think. And so I know the pace sounds really intense to some people, and I don't recommend it for people if that's not the way that your brain and your energy works. But for me, it's such a pleasure.
What is the regimentation of the day when you're doing the work? Do you work in the morning? Do you have a word count goal? Do you have a time goal? What do you work on?
Yeah, that's fantastic. Okay, so first of all, I outline. I did not used to outline. I used to
Yeah.
be a dedicated pantser. I really believed that my best work had to be organic and had to spring from the moment because when I was in the words, that's when I knew. But what happened was that I would end up having to throw away so much of my work because the plot went sideways because I didn't see the big picture as I was working. And so around my third novel, after I'd literally thrown away the second half of a draft, my editor said to me, do you think you want to try outlining? And I was like, "Ugh, absolutely not.
Bless her.
I'm not one of those people." Um, but what I discovered was I can do an in between. So I always
Yeah.
do an outline now where I map out 30 chapters because that is a comfortable number of chapters that my brain can hold and I feel like it's doable. And for each chapter, I write just two, maybe three sentences about
Mhm.
what's going to happen in that chapter. And that's my roadmap. And then now you ask me about what does my day look like. Now when I sit down, I know, okay, in 30 work days, I usually try not to work weekends. So
Mhm.
so it's like 6 weeks, right? Of five days a week. I can write a messy zero draft.
Yeah.
Each day I will write one chapter and I sit down, I've got my outline, I have my task for the day. So it feels really good. I'm like, okay, past Evelyn has told present Evelyn, this is what we're doing today. And present Evelyn sits down and she writes, and I am such a fan of Deep Work by Cal Newport,
Me
who
too.
talks about, yes, okay, so
Live and
I'm
die
sure
by
your
it. Hmm.
listeners know,
No, but tell us
you
because
shut
there
off
will
the
be
dish.
people listening who haven't heard of her well. So tell us the premise behind Deep
Okay,
Work.
So, the idea of deep work is that our brains have been trained for distraction nowadays with social media, dings, all these badges on your phone. So, when I sit down to write a zero draft, and pretty early, like even my first draft, I turn off all those badges and notifications on my phone, on my computer. And that way you can really fully immerse. And when you're in that zone of really that deep work, like my gosh, my brain, it seems like it fires two or three times faster than it
Hmm.
normally does because there's nothing, there's no other noise. And it takes a little while to get into it because you have to retrain your brain from that usual kind of like, the puppy who sees the squirrel, 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 right? Like you have to sit down in that space and it can be actually quite uncomfortable to have to sit in that chair. But once you get into it, like that's how I can write my zero draft now in 30 days because that's what I'm doing. That's all I'm doing right now in this space. And so my schedule is, I get up in the morning and I have breakfast, try to have a nice relaxing breakfast. Then I'll sit down and I'll write, for maybe like an hour and a half or so. For some reason, I can only do an hour and a half, 9:30 to 11. And then I get hungry. And once I'm hungry, I can't think anymore. It's like my brain is saying like glucose, please, right? So I go and I have lunch and I just work from home. Like I'm not a coffee shop kind of person because I like silence when I work. I know some people like music, but I'm a silence person. So then I go and I make myself some lunch. I sit out in my living room or my dining room. My husband also works from home, but he knows he does not talk to me. If I'm writing a zero draft or I'm on first draft stage, he's like, this is a no distraction time. Like Evelyn is in deep work still, even though I'm not sitting at my keyboard. And that lunchtime, it's like, my words have tapped out for a bit. I needed that break, but it is that quiet space again. No book, no music, no podcast. I am just staring at the wall or my food and being quiet. And so many different like plot not like knots will unsnarl during that time period, or suddenly I'll realize, oh, this is the piece of dialogue that I need to start, like where I left off in the morning. And then I'll go back and I'll write for about 2 more hours. And that's it. That's my day. I do 3.5 hours, max 4 hours if I can pull it off. But my brain, I can't really do more than 2 hours at a time because then I'm like, if you're really so intensely in deep work, you have exerted so much creative energy, but it feels so good. And then you have, the rest of your day to go do the things you want to have to do with your family, go see your friends. It's really, I like this system. It works for me.
You just kind of blew my mind with the whole quiet lunch idea because I do deep work. I have this incredible recliner over here, and when I leave my phone out of my reach and I turn on something called cold turkey writer, which turns your computer basically into a typewriter, and you can't look at anything. And I get into the chair, I don't want to get out. Like I am in and I'll do my zero drafting. I basically my process is exactly the same as yours. But when I get up to take a break or do lunch or whatever, I'm popping all the dopamine pills again. I'm checking email. I'm, checking in with my wife. I'm petting the dogs. I'm having conversations. Texting my sisters. And I'm wondering what my brain would do if I gave myself, because I could tell, my wife is also in the house, but I could tell her I'm doing some deep work. Let's not chat when I come
Yeah.
out of my office. And
Yeah.
that is so cool. I love that
Oh my gosh. If you
idea.
try it, I'm so curious. Let me know how it works for
That's
you.
like deep, deep work.
Yeah.
Oh, and yeah, and and in that book he says, he shows all the stats, and also I love Alex Sojung Pang Kim's book Rest. Have you read that one?
No, I haven't. I'll have to check it
Oh,
out.
it's so good. He and Cal Newport, I think, walk hand in hand, but Alex talks about rest being necessary, but it's not, it's like creative rest is what we do in between the times of work. And in
Mm.
both books, they talk about how we tap out at 2 to 4 hours. Our brains can't do mastery level work. Even the best of the best who've done this for 30, 40 years can't, tap out after 3.5 hours. So when writers say, well, I can't write for 8 hours a day. Oh my God, who could? No one
Right.
can.
I mean, you can if you're not doing your best work. I
Yeah.
mean, maybe it's true for some people, but for
Oh, there's
most
always
people
going to
I
be
know,
outliers. Yeah.
right,
Yeah.
yeah, but for most writers that I've ever talked to, that's just impossible. Like this is not a job that you like punch a card and then you log your 8 hours.
Sometimes I wish it were. What part of the writing process do you struggle with the most?
Plot. I'm so bad at plot, Rachel.
We
I
are
just, oh,
identical. You and
yeah.
I just plot is the worst. I'm first drafting right now, and it's the worst, worst.
It really is. And I think for me, the save the cat structure has helped because it just reminds me when I need things to happen.
Hmm.
And I'll say, oh, right, something bad has to happen here, or like, oh, we're building up some good things. It's fun and games right now.
Hmm.
And I know some people will poo-poo Save the Cat and say, oh, it's so reductive, it's so basic. But I think if you're someone like me, or maybe like you, where plot is actually, it does not come intuitively to me, that I just need those guardrails and it helps so much. Like character, I have no problem with. Like ambience, easy peasy. But plot, that's always the hardest part, which I think is surprising for a lot of other writers who come like, plot is so easy for them. The action is so easy.
And they'll be talking to you at I just got back from a writers conference and everybody was talking about their new book ideas and they had whole books in their ideas with
Yeah,
plot.
just
And
they're holding the
so
entire plot in their head with all the details, and
I
I just
can't.
think,
Yeah.
wow.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, that's awesome. Thank you for that and making me feel seen. Would you be able to share a writing craft tip of any sort that you've come across in your years?
Ooh. Okay, my favorite tip that I apply to myself is you put everything that you've got into the current book.
Mm.
And I know we all have a tendency to want to save little good morsels for something later down the road, or you think, oh, no, no, I just had this interesting life experience, but like, I think there's enough in this book. Like, no, I just put everything I can, like everything I'm thinking about, obviously adjusted for the characters in the story, but I put everything that's relevant that I've lived up to that moment into the book. And
Mm.
that makes your story and your characters so fleshed out and real, because I'm a real person and I've put all of me into it. Whereas if you're saving things and you're just writing a character profile, you're going to miss things and they're going to seem a little bit, I don't know, a little bit more cardboard, in my opinion.
And I have this theory too that the universe or whatever's out there rewards us for that. Do you ever feel like that? This is such a precious idea. I can't use it here. It's not a good enough place for it. But as soon as I use it, something better backfills
Something
in.
else comes. Yes.
Always.
And then
Yeah.
we go back to that fallow period. If you've put everything else in, you're not holding on to anything. You're not like space saving. You're not like saving a seat for somebody for another story. You have that space now, right? For the universe or whatever
Yeah.
power you believe in to like let something else come to you.
That's beautiful. It reminds me of the Annie Dillard quote from The Writing Life where she says, "Spend it all, play it all, hold nothing back." And I'm definitely butchering the quote, but yeah. Oh,
Yeah, I love
beautiful.
that. Definitely subscribe to that.
Thank you. What is the kindest thing that you have ever done for yourself as a writer?
Ooh. Okay, this is kind of a revelation I've come to only recently.
Ooh.
And this is that I think a lot of the news we hear are about overnight successes, or we hear about the biggest bestsellers. And it is very easy to compare ourselves to them. My husband, though, points out that we are in a very strange industry where we compare ourselves with the best in the entire world.
It's
Whereas
true.
in his job, he says, no one comes and says, wow, Tom, you made the best PowerPoint presentation in the world today.
Ever. Everyone's going to
Ever,
talk about this
ever. Exactly.
forever.
So many people want to see your that Excel worksheet. Oh my gosh, the number of clicks. And I realized that that is not actually not only not a healthy measure of success, but not a true measure of success. Because I've been around now long enough that a lot of the authors I started with are no longer writing books.
Right? The
Yes,
the attrition rate
yes.
is
The
shocking.
attrition rate. Yeah, I think I've heard somewhere that the average is two books and then people just leave the industry. I know. And so I think that the kindest thing that I've done for myself is realizing that what success looks like is having a long career. Still being here after 10 books and still writing the kinds of stories that readers connect with. Like, sure, would it be nice if I sold 1 million copies of a book? Absolutely. But is it so worthwhile when I get notes, from readers saying, "Oh my gosh, this story really touched me," or "this made me completely think about like change the way I think about my relationships." Wow, And to get to
Mm.
keep doing that for a decade and to keep doing it for as long as you want, I think that is actually success. Like that's staying power. And and honestly, this is kind of another kind thing to say to yourself, you're amazing. Like you stuck around. Like this is not an easy industry. Being a creative is hard, the ups and downs. And, so my first couple of books were New York Times bestsellers. And I think people have a tendency to think that once you've made it in any kind of artistic field, you've made it forever. But they don't know that I have had books that have just fallen flat on their faces, literally sold like 400 copies over years,
Hmm.
and other ones that did really well. And it is a constant up and down. I still have books that I will propose an idea, sometimes even write a whole manuscript, and my agent will send it out to editors, and nobody wants it. It still happens. And so success, I think, is like longevity. Here we are. Here you and I are. We're still here. I mean, good gosh, this podcast, over 500 episodes.
Isn't
Congratulations. That's
isn't that great?
amazing.
The success is longevity. I'm whenever you see me looking down, I'm marking notes. Just right before we got on this call, I had, I'd made this drawing for people who pre-ordered my latest book, and I did the drawing, and what this woman's name popped up, and I thought that's kind of familiar. I did the random.org drawing, and I looked her up, and you look up people in your email just to see like what kind of contacts you've had with them. In 2010, she had pre-ordered my first book and
Oh,
had
wow.
entered whatever drawing that was, and that's how far, like, so for 15 years she has been doing this, and that made me feel like the biggest success in that moment, just right
Yes.
before we chatted, because there was a reader who wanted to read it then, and she wants to read this book now. Or she
Yes.
really wants what I'm offering in the drawings. It could be
Well,
either one.
hey, you
But
know what? Then you're a successful giveaway person because you do really good drawings.
I am excellent at that. Thank you. What a beautiful, beautiful way to look at that. And I've never really thought about that so clearly. Why do we compare ourselves to the absolute best? All right. Would you please tell us about a specific moment in your life that you knew you had ink in your veins?
Oh my gosh. Okay. So when I was a teenager, I desperately wanted to be a vampire.
I mean,
I know
why
you didn't
wouldn't you? They're sexy. They're.
you didn't expect that though.
I did not expect it. Tell me more.
And I was very obsessed with Anne Rice at the time. I think it was before the movies came out for Interview with a Vampire, but I was just really into this. And, you're a teenager, you think you're angsty, blah, 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 blah. So I really wanted to be a vampire. I was literally waiting for the vampires to come and get me some night, and they would fill my veins with their blood, right?
Yeah.
But around the same time, my wonderful English teacher, we were studying Hamlet, and she had this great way of connecting with students where they were. And she would say, I want you to do a group project. And each of you can pick a scene from Hamlet and rewrite it in whatever style you want. And
Mm.
so I was very, like I said, very pro vampire. I was very strong willed. And so I led my group into rewriting this scene from Hamlet with vampires. And when I did it, I realized, oh my goodness, this is so fun. And I think at that moment, I didn't realize yet that I was going to be a writer because I did not know that writer was an actual job. But looking back, I'm like, oh, that was the moment. That was ink in my veins. It was not vampire blood that was supposed to be in my veins. It was just ink.
And the vampire yen was the way for you to get there. That was the way
That's
for you
right.
to learn that. What a special teacher. Have you ever connected with her and
I
told her?
have
Yeah.
afterwards, yes. And like she was just so excited and thrilled that I ended up being an author.
I think right. The old teachers are the ones who are the most excited. Our relatives don't care, but our teachers are like, yes. You know, that's beautiful. Thank you for that. Will you please tell us about the best book that you have read recently and why you loved it?
Ooh. Okay, I just finished Exhalation by Ted Chiang, and
Mm.
it is actually a collection of short stories. I'd heard about it for years and ignored it because one, I don't usually read short stories. Two, it's sci-fi, and I don't read that much sci-fi. But my husband had read it, he really enjoyed it, and he said, you should read this. And so I picked it up, and it's not really like sci-fi, it's more like speculative but grounded. But really, I think of them as little philosophical morsels of humanity. And each
Mm.
story just made me think. And not in like a, oh no, the world is falling down dystopian way. It was really kind of like, wow, what does it mean to be human? And what do small changes in our lives, like how can this completely steer things in a different direction? It was so thought-provoking in a way that I was not expecting. And it was also perfect because I was in the midst of book publicity for The Incredible Kindness of Paper. I didn't really have time to sink myself into a full novel. And so these short stories,
Yeah.
it was perfect. So yeah, Exhalation by Ted Chiang. I think I will probably reread it again in, 2 or 3 years because I will be a different person at that
Hmm.
point, and probably I will, interact with those stories and think differently because of them. So I really enjoyed that. I wish I could be such a deep thinker, but yeah, anyway, I really love that.
I was thinking what talent that must be to be able to pull a philosophical piece of truth and make it matter in a short story. So I will definitely be looking at those because I think short stories are so difficult to write. That's
Very
why I
difficult,
write
right? I think,
novels.
yeah, people don't realize that the different kinds of writing are
Yeah,
actually so different. People
so
say,
different.
they say, "Oh, would you be a screenwriter?" I'm like, "No, that's like a totally different thing."
I would be terrible. Screenwriting has so much plot. So
I
much plot.
know.
Forget it.
We'd be
I'm
the
out.
worst.
All right. Will you please tell us about The Incredible Kindness of Paper? Give us a little bit about
Yes.
what it is about.
Okay, so The Incredible Kindness of Paper. This is about Chloe, who is a high school guidance counselor. And one of her favorite things to do is she folds encouraging messages inside little yellow origami roses for her students. And that way, when they leave her office, they still remember that someone sees them and believes in them. It's so easy to forget that. Once, even as adults, we go into the world and we forget that we've got our friends and our family who believe in us. So she unfortunately loses her job in chapter one. And so she writes herself a little pep talk inside one of those origami roses. She tucks it into her pocket and goes home. She's having a rotten day. And then she loses the rose. But the person who finds it is her elderly neighbor, who is actually having a worse day because she has found out she's being evicted. Her social security is not covering the costs of things anymore. But the message inside that paper rose is exactly what this woman, Thelma, needs. And so it helps her change her life, her perspective. So when Chloe finds this out, she thinks, okay, while I'm looking for a new job, why don't I just write these messages and fold these paper roses and leave them around New York City? Because, people here really, I think they might need it. And so that's basically what this story starts out as. And someone on Goodreads, they said that this is like Love Actually for human connection. And
Oh,
I thought that was
yes, I
so
agree.
perfect. Yeah, she
Yes.
got it, right? She
Yeah.
understood what this story was about. Like, yes, it's about small
Oh,
acts of kindness, but it's really about seeing each other as people. And so that's really what The Incredible Kindness of Paper is about. There's also, a childhood friend, a lost pen pal who comes back into Chloe's life as adults. And there's, some stuff going on with paper roses going back and forth between them and messages. But I think at its core, it's just about connecting with people and getting back to that one-on-one level and realizing the superpower that we have to change somebody's day just by saying hi to them or complimenting their earrings. By the way, I really like your earrings,
thank you.
or
Thank you.
like, talking about their, like smile at your barista, those kinds of things.
Yeah.
You can really make a difference, and people don't realize that because they think, oh, if I'm going to change the world, I have to, figure out world peace. And that would be nice. Go ahead and do that if you can. But also, you can do these little things, and what a difference we could all make if we all made that little effort.
I may have mentioned this on the show before, but there many years ago in Oakland, maybe 10 years ago, I was stopped at a stoplight, completely just like, in my own head, getting where I was going. And an elderly man crossed very slowly in front of my car in the crosswalk pedestrian. And he turned and he looked at me and he gave me the biggest smile I've ever seen on a human being. And he waved and we had the biggest heart connection. And I think about that man once a week for 10
Oh
years. Like
my
he changed
gosh.
everything for me that day. Eh, eh, just that one smile.
Yes. Oh my gosh, I love that so much.
But would you agree? And I think I'm leading the witness too that whenever I teach, I have this quote that we read and it ends, basically it's saying in writing we're changing the world one word at a time. But what I always point out is that yes, our words will change the world one word at a time once they're out there, once they're in book form, etc. We know that. But we're changing the world, I believe, every day we sit down to write because if I don't sit down to write, I'm a bitch. I'm just not fun to be around. Nobody wants to play with me. That's not actually true. I can be pretty nice, but inside I feel terrible. Um, and if I sit down to write, then I am a better person, and then I can go out and be the smile. And I am changing the world just because I'm writing. The world is getting better because of it. What do you think? having been led.
I do think there is something to that. I'm good during my like fallow period because I'm just exhausted and I just
Yes.
need to do nothing. But there always comes a moment where I start getting a little nitpicky around the house,
Ooh.
and my husband he is the sweetest man and he will never call me out on it. But eventually, after like 2 or so weeks of this, I'll say, you know what? I think I need to start writing it again. And he'll say, oh, yeah, that might be a good idea. But of course, he's noticed it the whole time and he knows, but he also knows I have to get there myself. And you would think that after multiple cycles of this, I would have figured it out, but it's a revelation every time.
We never, ever, ever figure it out. And almost in a way, good for us. I mean, it always makes it exciting and fresh.
Yes.
Will you please tell us where we can find you out there online?
Yes, I am on Instagram at Evelyn_Skye. I also have a Substack. It's called Creative Inspired Happy. So that's
Ooh,
creativeinspiredhappy.com. And it's just a place for writers and readers to gather and get the behind the scenes of writing and just, I don't know, tap into that like good, positive, creative spirit. And my podcast is also based there, but it's also on YouTube. It's also on Apple and Spotify and all the places. That's just called Creative Inspired Happy. So I'm pretty easy to find. Just search Evelyn Skye.
I'm going to go subscribe to your Substack immediately. So thank you for that. Thank you so much for being on the show. Your book is a freaking delight and you are a joy. It's so
Oh,
nice to
thank
meet
you.
you and have you here.
Likewise. Thank you for having me.